Alright, friend, let's talk. You ever get that feeling like you're stuck in someone else's twisted game? Maybe it's at work, maybe it's in your family, maybe it's just some random person trying to push your buttons. The smartest thing you'll ever do is realize that some battles just aren't worth fighting. Honestly, when you decide to ignore the petty power plays, the backstabbing gossip, the whole charade, you're not just walking away. You're basically wiping your feet on their entire ego. Here's the thing I've learned: people can't stand being ignored, especially by someone they were trying to control. It's not just that they're annoyed, it messes with their heads. They thought they were so clever, planning all these elaborate schemes, setting traps like some cartoon villain, but you just shrugged and said, "Not interested." Imagine someone showing up for a boxing match only to find out their opponent decided to stay home and order pizza. They're swinging at thin air, looking ridiculous, and everyone's laughing. And the real kicker: you didn't just refuse to play, you exposed their whole game. Every manipulation just highlighted their own desperation. Every lie just showed how empty they really were. So while they're sitting there stewing, you're out there living your life, enjoying your peace. It's not just about walking away, it's about what that walk away did to them. It completely changed the game. You didn't beat them at their game. You made the game irrelevant. And that's the kind of sting that keeps people up at night, wondering how they got outsmarted by someone who didn't even bother to show up. Get ready, because we're about to dig deep into why your refusal to engage left them feeling bitter, humiliated, and utterly exposed, and why it's one of the smartest things you've ever done. First, they thought you were weak. Then they realized you were powerful. This is what really gets to them. At first, they probably thought you were scared, intimidated, or just not smart enough to play their games. They figured you were backing down because you couldn't handle the pressure. But when they finally realized you weren't avoiding their battles out of fear, but because you didn't even consider them worth your time, it hit them hard. It's a different kind of hurt than any direct confrontation could cause. Think about it, these kinds of people thrive on your reactions. They need your energy, your defenses, your counterattacks. That's what fuels their little fires. When you stay disinterested, you're not just withholding fuel, you're showing how weak their whole system is without it. Suddenly, their elaborate strategies look like nothing more than wasted effort. Every trap they set becomes a pit they end up staring into themselves. The real sting isn't that you walked away, it's that you walked away unscathed. While they were obsessing over how to outsmart you, you were building a life outside their drama. They were stuck in cycles of manipulation while you were building peace, resilience, and clarity. That's where the bitterness comes from. Realizing that all their effort left them with nothing while your refusal made you stronger. Disinterest is a powerful tool that most people underestimate. It takes away the stage that manipulators crave. It denies them the validation they seek, whether through victory or conflict. And when they see you thriving without their games, they're forced to face a brutal truth: they needed you far more than you ever needed them. That's a humiliating realization that's hard to shake. They miscalculated your moves, sure, but more importantly, they miscalculated your entire mindset. They expected a fight. What they didn't expect was for you to look at their game board and realize it was worthless. That's when their confidence crumbles. Your disinterest exposed their powerlessness, and the more they think about it, the dumber they feel. Second, their entire sense of self was wrapped up in outsmarting you, and that's precisely why they feel so foolish now. They secretly made you their competition from the beginning. Every move, every word, every scheme was designed to prove they were smarter, sharper, and more cunning than you. It wasn't about living their own lives or pursuing their own goals. It was about making sure you never came out on top. That became their whole identity. The problem with building your sense of self around defeating someone else is that it makes your entire existence incredibly fragile. Your worth becomes tied to whether you can one-up another person. They study your every move, mimic your style, watching you with the intensity of someone preparing for war. But when you refuse to play, when you step out of the ring, all that preparation becomes pointless. They have nothing left to define themselves by. That emptiness is where the bitterness grows. What makes it sting even more is that you never asked for any of this. You weren't trying to outsmart them, you weren't competing, you were just being yourself, moving at your own pace, building in silence. Yet to them, everything you did was a challenge. Everything you achieved was a threat. When you showed no interest in competing, they realized they'd wasted years shadowboxing with someone who wasn't even fighting back. That's humiliation at its core. It's also why they can't let it go. To admit you're not interested is to admit all their clever tactics were pointless. To admit you never considered them an opponent is to admit their entire self-image is built on nothing. It's a hard pill to swallow because it forces them to face the truth. They weren't outsmarting you. They were amusing themselves with an illusion. This is why your presence is so unsettling to them even now. You represent a mirror they can't avoid showing them how insignificant their victories really were. They tried to build an identity around being the puppet master, but without your participation, they're just someone pulling strings in an empty room. That's not power, that's desperation, and it's why they feel so incredibly stupid. Third, you revealed how shallow their intelligence really is. They thought manipulation was the ultimate sign of intelligence. And that's why they feel exposed. They believe tricking people, twisting narratives, and bending morals to get what they wanted was proof they were smarter than everyone else. Sneaky equaled superior. Honesty was seen as weakness, integrity as something to mock. But when you refused to play their games, the truth hit them hard. Their brilliance was just shallow cunning. Real intelligence builds, grows, and elevates others. Manipulation only tears down. It leaves behind destruction, mistrust, and emptiness. They thought they were clever, but when you walked away and still stood stronger, happier, and freer than them, their illusion of superiority crumbled. Suddenly, all those years of scheming looked childish. All those lies and half-truths looked pathetic next to the stability of someone who never needed them in the first place. The sting is that manipulation only works on those seeking validation. You didn't, and that's where the humiliation comes in. When they tried to gaslight you, you saw right through it. When they tried guilt or pressure, you refused to bend. That resistance forced them to realize their intelligence has limits, glaring limits when faced with someone who thinks beyond surface-level tricks. What makes it worse is how obvious their weakness becomes when the mask of cleverness is pulled off. Everyone can see it. Those who believed in their sharpness start noticing the cracks, the failures, the lies. While they scramble to maintain the image you've proven, true intelligence doesn't require control. It requires freedom. That's the bitter truth they choke on. Manipulation can make someone look powerful for a time, but it never lasts. When faced with truth, manipulation looks like cheap theater. The moment they realized their playbook was useless against you, their intelligence shriveled into embarrassment. They feel dumb because deep down they finally see they never were as smart as they thought. Now are you starting to get a clear image how this affects them? We're not done yet. There are even more truths waiting for us. Fourth, you forced them to confront the fact that they were entertaining themselves, not winning anything. They thought they were winning, that every move, every manipulation, every piece of gossip was taking them closer to some ultimate victory. Their lives revolved around strategies to outshine, outmaneuver, and outplay. They saw their games as serious, high-stakes battles. But by walking away, you forced them to face a truth they couldn't escape. The scoreboard they were so obsessed with was completely imaginary. All those hours spent calculating, planning, and scheming didn't bring them any real advantage. They weren't earning respect, loyalty, or influence. They were only spinning in their own world, congratulating themselves for victories that didn't exist outside their heads. When you walked away, the contrast became undeniable. You didn't need validation, recognition, or to prove yourself in their petty contests. Your freedom exposed the hollowness of their entire world. What makes it even more humiliating is that they can't argue with it. You didn't confront them, call them out, or retaliate. You simply moved on. Their years of effort, narratives, and energy evaporated because you weren't there to make the games meaningful. They see that all the supposed victories were just entertainment for themselves. They were applauding their own performance, missing that the audience that mattered was never paying attention. That realization stings because it's not just about losing, it's about a wasted life. All that obsession, stress, and stratagem. For what? No actual prize, no real gain, just bruised egos and growing awareness that they spent their time chasing illusions. Meanwhile, you've been living untouched, building something real, solid, and untouchable. The contrast is unbearable. They see it and can't erase it. By refusing to participate, you didn't just walk away. You forced them to confront the emptiness of their own games. That confrontation is brutal. It's the moment they finally understand they've been entertaining themselves all along, and the people they thought they were impressing were never invested in the first place. That's why they're bitter, frustrated, and feeling dumb as hell. Fifth, they can't understand why your peace outshines their victories. They've spent years collecting achievements, allies, and accolades, carefully crafting an image of superiority. Every promotion, recognition, nod from the right people was supposed to prove they were on top, untouchable, cleverer than everyone else. They've built a life that screams success, and yet no matter how high they climb or how loud they celebrate, it doesn't create what you already have: effortlessly calm authority. Your peace isn't something you earn or display, it's a presence. It doesn't need validation, applause, or acknowledgement. It simply exists, and it carries weight without force. That's what they can't understand. They see all their trophies, alliances, and visible signs of power, and they think that should be enough to make them feel superior. But when they encounter someone whose inner strength and serenity outshine all that effort, it's not just frustrating, it's humiliating. Their victories suddenly look shallow because they're external, loud, and conditional, while your authority is internal, quiet, and absolute. The harsh truth they have to confront is that dominance isn't measured by accumulation or manipulation. Your power comes from self-possession, clarity, and the ability to move through life without being rattled by petty tactics or validation. And that's why they feel dumb. They've worked tirelessly to achieve things that, while impressive on the surface, don't give them the real influence or calm you embody naturally. They thought winning meant controlling outcomes, impressing others, or stacking accolades, but none of that can manufacture what you carry inside. Every time they compare themselves to you, it's a silent defeat, not because you confronted them, outmaneuvered them, or won in any measurable way, but because you didn't have to. You never needed to prove anything. You never needed to fight for acknowledgement. Your life and your peace do all the talking, and that exposes their effort for what it really is: loud, performative, and ultimately hollow. That's why their confusion turns into bitterness. They can't process the reality that true strength isn't about victory over others. It's about mastery over oneself, and you've already claimed it effortlessly. Are you starting to see the full effect of your actions? You've done more than just protect yourself. You've subtly dismantled their entire worldview. Want to know more? There are still 9 truths waiting for you. Keep reading, and you'll understand the full extent of your impact. 6th, you turned their secrets into self-incrimination without saying a word. Every scheme they tried to pull on you ended up revealing far more about them than it ever did about you. They spent time plotting, manipulating, and twisting situations to their advantage, thinking they were controlling the narrative. But by refusing to stoop to their level, by holding fast to your own integrity, you created a mirror they couldn't avoid. Every lie, half-truth, and attempt to manipulate was caught in the light of your authenticity. And in that light, their flaws, selfishness, and desperation became impossible to hide. You didn't need to call them out, argue, or fight. Your mere presence and consistency exposed them. They were trying to entangle you, but instead they entangled themselves. Every move they made intended to undermine or trap you acted like a confession about who they really are. Their words, actions, and even silences began to work against them. What they thought were clever schemes became evidence of their insecurities, manipulations, and moral compromises. The brilliance of this is that it wasn't your effort that humiliated them. It was their own choices. By holding on to honesty, calm, and focus, you turned them into their own witness. They became the source of their own downfall, showing everyone around them what they tried to hide from themselves. The more they schemed, the more visible their character flaws became, and the more everyone could see the contrast between your integrity and their duplicity. This kind of exposure is permanent. Once someone's manipulations and true nature are revealed, it's impossible to erase the impression. People remember the moments when intentions were clear, when deceit was unmasked by someone who refused to participate in the charade, and the crushing part for them is that you didn't even have to do anything dramatic. You didn't need confrontation or theatrics. You just existed with unwavering integrity, and that alone illuminated their shadows. In the end, they're left to wrestle with the consequences of their own actions publicly and privately. Their secrets, which they believed would give them control, instead cemented their humiliation. And you, by staying true to yourself, became the silent force that turned every attempt to harm or manipulate you into undeniable proof of their own flaws. That kind of self-incrimination born from integrity alone leaves a mark that can't be ignored, rewritten, or forgotten. Seventh, you proved that manipulation requires a willing victim. They spent years assuming that everyone could be twisted, bent, or maneuvered to fit their schemes, and they counted on you being no different. Every lie, bit of gaslighting attempt to triangulate and control depended entirely on your participation. Without someone to react, defend, worry, or falter, their manipulations have nothing to feed on. You didn't just refuse to play. You pulled yourself out of the system that gives their games power, and that's what drives them insane. Manipulation only works when the target is vulnerable, unaware, or desperate for validation. They relied on you being distracted, reactive, or emotionally invested. They never considered someone could see through the entire structure and remain untouched by it. By refusing to engage, you exposed the entire strategy as fragile and meaningless. Every tactic they thought was genius became obvious, pointless, and even laughable. Their sense of control evaporated because you didn't hand it to them, and that's a truth that cuts deeper than confrontation ever could. The bitterest part for them is that your awareness wasn't flashy or aggressive. You didn't need to call them out or fight back. You simply observed, stayed grounded, and refused to participate in the chaos. That simple act showed them the harsh reality: their schemes only function when someone allows them to function. Without a willing victim, the manipulator is powerless, and suddenly the years they spent planning, scheming, and trying to outsmart you look foolish. Their frustration isn't just about losing control, it's about being exposed as dependent on others' ignorance. They can't understand how someone could move through their traps with calm and clarity, because that's never happened before. Their cleverness was meant to dominate and confuse. But your refusal proved that intelligence without awareness is nothing more than a theatrical display. By refusing to be drawn in, you rewrote the rules of engagement. You became proof that manipulation isn't about skill, it's about access. The moment they realized their strategies had no power over you, they were forced to confront a humiliating truth. They overestimated themselves, underestimated your awareness, and mistook compliance for inevitability. That's why they feel dumb. They've been operating under the illusion of mastery, only to discover their whole system collapses when the target simply refuses to play. Eighth, you redefined the rules without lifting a finger. They spent countless hours setting up traps, crafting illusions, and building invisible walls meant to contain, control, and confuse you. Every obstacle was designed to force you into their terms, to make you play by their rules, to give them the satisfaction of feeling superior. They believed that if they carefully engineered the game, they could predict your every move. What they didn't account for was that you weren't playing at all. You weren't maneuvering within their constraints. You simply existed outside of them, untouched and unbound. The crushing part for them is the realization that all their effort was wasted. Every wall they built, every intricate plot they layered was powerless because you refused to acknowledge the rules. They thought they were controlling the narrative, but you were writing your own story entirely. And because you didn't react, didn't engage, and didn't conform, their entire strategy dissolved into irrelevance. It's one thing to lose a battle. It's another to watch the battlefield itself vanish beneath your feet. This isn't about cleverness or cunning on your part. You didn't need to plot, counter, or fight. You simply refused to be trapped, and that refusal reshaped the playing field. Their traps were designed to create tension, force reactions, and manipulate outcomes. But when no reaction came, the power dynamic shifted instantly. Their hours of scheming became evidence of their wasted energy, not of your struggle, and what's worse for them is that this isn't something they can fix. They can't rebuild the maze because the entire game was rendered meaningless by your very presence and clarity. Every plan they thought was foolproof now looks childish. Every effort to corner you now seems absurd. They are left standing in the ruins of their own making, forced to confront that the rules they counted on controlling were never real. They only existed for those willing to play. You didn't beat them, and that's the real humiliation. You didn't just outmaneuver them, you made the game itself irrelevant. They feel dumb because they dedicated so much time and energy to a battle that didn't matter to you at all. Their power was never yours to fight. It was theirs to surrender, and by refusing to play, you did it for them without saying a word. Ninth, you made them realize they were chasing shadows while you built substance. They spent so much time obsessed with appearances, optics, and perception that they forgot what real substance looks like. Every move they made, every word they spoke, every relationship they cultivated was designed to look impressive to others, to signal power, influence, or superiority. They mastered the art of looking like they had it all together, projecting an image of control and accomplishment. But all of that is fragile. It exists only on the surface, easily shattered by reality or insight. Meanwhile, you were building something far stronger. While they were focused on how things looked, you were focused on how things actually were. You invested in growth that couldn't be faked, in wisdom that couldn't be borrowed, in depth that couldn't be imitated. Every challenge you faced, every moment of struggle or reflection strengthened something inside you that no manipulation or optics could touch. Your foundation wasn't dependent on recognition or approval. It was real, tangible, and permanent. The blow to them comes from the contrast. They can fake power, influence, and intelligence. But you carry something they cannot manufacture: authenticity. They see it now, whether they admit it or not. They see that their carefully constructed facades crumble when faced with a presence that is grounded, unshakable, and genuine. Their trick strategies and self-promotion suddenly feel shallow, flimsy, and meaningless next to the quiet, undeniable strength you exude. That's why they feel dumb. They realize that while they were busy performing, you were building reality. While they were chasing shadows, status, appearances, manipulation, you were cultivating substance that can't be copied or stolen. Every attempt they made to impress, intimidate, or manipulate falls flat in comparison to the depth of someone who operates from integrity and understanding. They thought power was about perception, but you taught them otherwise without saying a word. Power, real power, comes from what you carry inside, from the truth of who you are, and from the growth you achieve without seeking anyone's approval. Their bitterness stems from the fact that they cannot fake this, cannot shortcut it, and cannot undo the gap you created. They are left chasing shadows while you move freely in a reality they can't reach. And that realization is crushing in the most humiliating way possible. 10th, your detachment made their obsession look insane. Their obsession became painfully obvious the moment you stopped caring. They've been consumed by watching, comparing, and competing, convinced that their every move would provoke a reaction, gain attention, or force a response. They built narratives, spun stories, and orchestrated situations expecting you to engage, expecting that your focus on them would validate their effort. But you didn't. You detached. You moved beyond their cycles of manipulation and drama, leaving them grasping at shadows that no longer existed. That asymmetry is what makes them look foolish. One side is frantic, hyper-focused, and emotionally invested, while the other moves with ease, calm, and indifference. They can't comprehend how someone could be so unaffected, so free, and yet so aware. Every attempt to draw you in or provoke you only highlights their immaturity and desperation. Their obsession, once hidden under pretense and calculated moves, now looks irrational and extreme because it exists entirely without reciprocation. The humiliation comes from realizing that their efforts don't matter. All their scheming, comparing, and strategizing was designed to control, intimidate, or impress, and yet none of it produced the desired outcome. Meanwhile, your liberation becomes a mirror showing them the absurdity of their obsession. You don't need to confront them to win. You simply exist beyond the scope of their influence. And that absence of engagement cuts deeper than any argument or confrontation ever could. It's not just about winning or losing. It's about exposing the imbalance. Nothing highlights desperation and immaturity faster than one-sided obsession. They are trapped in their own minds, consumed by thoughts of how to outmaneuver someone who stopped playing the game entirely. Their fixation becomes their own punishment, a constant reminder that they invested energy, time, and emotion into someone who refused to respond. Your detachment didn't just free you, it amplified their exposure. The more obsessed they become, the more obvious their folly. Every glance, every calculation, every comparison they make is another confirmation that they are trapped in their own making. Meanwhile, you move freely, untouched and unaffected, showing that the only thing they truly mastered was their own unnecessary fixation. The contrast between their obsession and your liberation is not just humiliating. It's undeniable, and it leaves them looking in the clearest terms completely irrational and foolish. The last 4 points still haven't been shown. Keep reading to understand clearly every level that they have to go through. This is the final piece so that the message you bring is complete and perfect. Let's go. 11th. They learned too late that your value was never up for auction. They spent so much time assuming they could control you with approval, favors, gifts, or influence, thinking that your loyalty, attention, or energy could be purchased. Every offer, every attempt to entice or manipulate was intended to make you bend, comply, or conform. They believed that by dangling rewards or wielding connections, they could turn you into a pawn, a commodity, or a reflection of their own ego. But they failed to realize that your value was never something that could be negotiated or traded. By refusing to be bought, you exposed a truth they couldn't handle. Their so-called power was built entirely on illusions. Approval is meaningless when it's offered as a bribe. Resources are irrelevant when the recipient doesn't need them. Relationships carry no weight when they're used as tools for control. Every bargaining chip they held, every tactic they thought would influence you turned out to be empty. Your independence rendered their efforts not just useless but absurd. The bitterest part for them is that they never had leverage in the first place. They thought they were negotiating, persuading, and dominating when in reality they were chasing shadows. All their strategies, their plotting, their attempts at persuasion revealed only their own desperation and lack of insight. And the more they tried to manipulate, the more visible it became to everyone around them that they were grasping at control that never existed. This realization leaves them exposed in the most humiliating way possible. They assumed they could corner someone who couldn't be cornered, that they could assign value to a person who defines their own worth. They imagined themselves as the architects of influence and power, only to discover that the person they were trying to move had never been inside the confines of their expectations. You didn't need to argue, prove yourself, or assert dominance. By simply refusing to participate in their transactional mindset, you highlighted the emptiness of their tactics. Their illusions of control shattered against the unshakable reality of your independence, and now they are left bitter, frustrated, and humiliated, forced to confront that they never had the leverage they thought they did. Your value was never up for sale, and the realization that they mistook it for a commodity is a wound that no manipulation can heal. 12th, you became the example they secretly resent but publicly imitate. They look at you and hate themselves a little for it, not because you did anything to them, not because you tried to prove yourself, but because your presence exposes the gaps in their own lives, that independence, that calm authority, that refusal to bend to their games. They secretly crave it. They admire it in ways they'll never admit, and yet in public they deride it as arrogance or selfishness. Every time they try to diminish you, it's really a reflection of their own insecurity. What makes it worse for them is that they can't simply replicate it. They try in private to mimic your confidence, your composure, your detachment, but it comes out forced, hollow, and obvious. Imitation is a pale shadow of authenticity, and authenticity is something you embody without effort. Every step you take, every choice you make, every moment of calm decisiveness highlights how staged their attempts are. Their public dismissal and private imitation are two sides of the same humiliation. They are forced to engage with a standard they cannot meet. This dynamic is brutal because it reverses the power they thought they had. They believed they could define the rules, dictate respect, or manipulate perception. Instead, you redefined it by simply being yourself. Your independence isn't performative, it's innate. It doesn't need approval or recognition. That contrast makes them painfully aware of the gaps in their own identity. Every move they make to imitate you reminds them of what they are not, and every glance they throw in public to demean you is a failed attempt to mask their envy. The irony is savage. They criticize and belittle you to assert dominance, but their very attempts only amplify the qualities they wish they possessed. You became the standard they can't reach, the mirror that reflects their own shortcomings, and the silent proof that their so-called independence is contrived. And because you do it without aggression, without confrontation, and without trying, their failure becomes unmistakable. They are stuck between resentment and imitation, admiration and humiliation. Every time they think they've minimized you, they are reminded of what you represent: freedom, authenticity, and unshakable self-possession. That's why your example is both infuriating and irresistible, and why they feel exposed, inadequate, and in the end, profoundly foolish. 13th, you turn their social circles into echo chambers of insecurity. Every word they whisper about you, every story they spin, every attempt to frame you in a negative light only magnifies their own insecurity. They think gossip is power, that by controlling the narrative in their social circles they can diminish your presence or influence, but the truth is exactly the opposite. By refusing to participate in their games and walking your own path, you've elevated yourself above their reach, leaving them stranded in their own petty dramas. Those alliances they proudly display aren't proof of strength. They're makeshift support systems to calm collective embarrassment. Their social circles, once tools of influence and dominance, have turned into echo chambers where their bitterness reverberates endlessly. They repeat stories, theories, and criticisms, trying to validate themselves, but the more they talk, the louder it becomes that none of it touches you. Deep down, everyone around them knows the reality. You're free, thriving, and unaffected, while they remain tangled in frustration, envy, and desperation. That contrast, unspoken but obvious, is humiliating for them. What makes it worse is that the circle itself begins to reinforce their failure. Each person in the group repeats their complaints and conspiracies, not because they're true, but because they sense the desperation behind them. Their attempts at creating a united front are really just attempts to soothe their own bruised egos. Instead of building influence, they're manufacturing validation for feelings of inadequacy. Every whispered word, every shared complaint confirms for them and for anyone paying attention that they haven't progressed while you've been quietly, undeniably moving forward. Your absence from their drama is deafening. You don't need to defend yourself, respond, or clarify, because your life is proof enough. Every conversation about you that takes place in their circles only reinforces what they fear most: that you are untouchable by their manipulations, and that their collective efforts are futile. They've turned their social networks into theaters of insecurity where the audience and performers are both trapped in the same humiliating loop. By simply walking away, you've made their social strategy irrelevant and exposed their gatherings for what they truly are, forms to mask their own weaknesses. Their echo chambers don't intimidate, influence, or harm you. They only amplify their own failure and envy, leaving them bitter, frustrated, and increasingly aware of just how powerless they really are. 14th, you proved that winning isn't about outplaying, it's about refusing to play. The cruelest truth for them is that they've been measuring life through a lens of competition, thinking every interaction, every connection, every maneuver was a battlefield where winning meant outsmarting, controlling, or dominating someone else. They built their strategies, their reputations, and even their identities around the idea that success is a zero-sum game and that they could only feel powerful if someone else felt weaker. But you shattered that entire framework without even stepping into the ring. By refusing to play, you showed them that real power isn't earned by outmaneuvering others. It's earned by stepping outside the game entirely. You didn't need to counter their schemes, respond to their manipulations, or prove yourself in any measurable way. Your independence, your clarity, and your focus made their strategies irrelevant. Their calculated moves and carefully engineered victories became meaningless because you weren't even participating. And that's the part they can't process. They thought they were competing with you, that every effort to impress, intimidate, or control would matter. Every calculation, every manipulation, every ounce of energy they poured into trying to win evaporated the moment you refused to engage. That refusal wasn't passive. It was a declaration of superiority in its purest form. You didn't just walk away, you transcended the playing field. You turned the rules upside down without lifting a finger, leaving them exposed and scrambling to comprehend how someone could succeed without entering their contests. The humiliation is unbearable for them because it reveals the emptiness of their entire approach. Their life strategy, built on competition and control, collapses in the presence of someone who refuses to be controlled or measured by their terms. And the more they try to make sense of it, the dumber they feel because no explanation exists within their logic. You didn't play, yet you won. You didn't manipulate, yet you prevailed. You didn't compete, yet you emerged untouchable. That's why they feel dumb as hell. They dedicated energy, time, and emotion to defeating someone who never intended to fight. Their obsession with outplaying missed the point entirely because true victory wasn't in the game. It was in their inability to drag you into it. And the realization that their entire system failed against someone who refused to engage is a truth that stings harder than any loss ever could. The reality is undeniable. By refusing to participate in their games, you rewrote the rules of engagement entirely. You didn't just walk away. You exposed their illusions, highlighted their weaknesses, and revealed the hollowness of strategies built on manipulation, envy, and control. Every scheme, every attempt at influence, every whisper and calculated move only amplified your strength and independence while underscoring their desperation and insecurity. They invested time, energy, and emotion trying to control someone who simply refused to be controlled. and that refusal became the ultimate victory. You proved that true power doesn't require conflict, validation, or recognition. It exists in clarity, authenticity, and unwavering self-possession. While they were busy chasing shadows, building facades, and obsessing over perception, you were quietly cultivating substance, wisdom, and freedom that cannot be faked or replicated. You didn't just win. You transcended, and that is what leaves them bitter, frustrated, and painfully aware of their own inadequacies. The lessons are clear: independence cannot be bought. Manipulation only works with willing participants, and chasing someone who refuses to engage is an exercise in futility. Your presence alone exposed their flaws, their insecurity, and the emptiness of their victories. Every attempt to outplay you became evidence of their own limitations, and every bit of obsession or gossip only amplified the contrast between your life and theirs. At the end of the day, your triumph wasn't in defeating anyone. It was in refusing to fight on their terms and moving freely while they remained trapped in their own illusions, and in building a life so grounded that their entire strategy collapsed against it. They thought they were the players, but you became the force that made the game irrelevant. And that ultimately is why they feel dumb, bitter, and exposed, because nothing they did could touch someone who refused to participate in their chaos. So friend, take this understanding and stride forward with confidence. Know that your peace, your authenticity, and your refusal to play are your greatest strengths. Let them stew in their own bitterness while you build a life that truly matters. And remember, you are not defined by their games. You are defined by your own unwavering spirit. Spirit, 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 spirit.